Hi, everyone. Welcome to our 10th episode of the Immersive Learning Research Network's Illuminators Forum. I've got my friend and colleague, Rob Theriault, with me here today, and we're super excited. Hi, Rob.
Hi, great to be
Oh,
here.
yeah, good. Glad you could join us. We're itching here at iLearn to get, sprucing things up to get ready for our conference that's starting. Our 12th annual conference starts on in just a couple days on Sunday. And we just had a virtual campus tour with examples from across these different areas of application. And I'm so excited to talk with you today about this incredible tour and this book that you've created on the future of education is experiential. So
Yeah,
um,
thank
thanks.
you.
Yeah, this is just great. We had iLearn has been starting this like back in December, and really there's so much going on in this space, so much quickly happening in this world and emerging that we thought we should start doing some active sense making with our community and with people who have their fingers on the pulse in different ways. And so, thanks for joining us in that regard, because
Mm,
you're very knowledgeable and have been very active. Can you maybe tell everybody, introduce yourself a bit, if that would be okay?
Sure. Yeah, and I do have a slide deck, but we can stick to the sort of sequence of those, or we can go off in any direction you like at any point. But I have been an educator almost for 4 decades. I
Yeah,
started originally as a paramedic and worked as a paramedic for 35 years and taught paramedics for 34 years. So I had dual careers.
hmm,
And talk about that in a second. And started exploring virtual mixed and augmented reality, and ended up transitioning to a position where I was helping faculty to explore and integrate XR.
right. Um, yeah. So thanks. Just yeah, just a brief intro. I should have let you know that was coming, but
Bruce,
yeah, just a quick
I
overview.
could,
We'll dive right into
I
it.
could,
Go
yeah, I
ahead.
was going to say I can elaborate more on it when we get to the slide
Yeah,
deck.
totally. I mean, your background shines through in your book, and I saw some of the slides that might be reflective of that. But just wanted a quick say hello to you and get going.
Yeah,
Yeah. The Immersive Learning Research Network is started this Illuminators Forum as a way to shine lights of immersive learning on kind of what's going on in the space, interviewing specific scholars and bright lights and people doing work in these spaces to highlight specific topical areas. So this is our 10th one, and we usually kick off with a trend. We're looking at kind of what's happening in the world of immersive learning, um, and I thought this was really a great hitting the right moment here, where we've talked about this experience economy for years, going back to Build-A-Bear with John Nesbitt's Megatrends back in the late 80s was talking about how economies were moving towards unique experiences. And now we're moving into an era where experience is becoming perhaps the primary mechanism for people to focus on um, learning and workforce preparation, career exploration, professional development, and civic participation. So, as Rob's book title, The Future of Education is Experiential. I think this is dead on. So, just a couple of points there that in career exploration as an experience, recently we there was a something that came out. Career Pooler found these, AI powered metaphorical pools for being able to help people explore different careers. So you're seeing AI and simulations and XR kind of mixing in that way. The workforce is starting to increasingly preparing to skill up using some experiential types of things. And I know Rob will talk about some of those things in his book, but this is just corroborating sort of evidence that's out there. IBM Skills Build has a number of really cool opportunities. And then also civic participation. People are increasingly asked, or have always for many, many centuries been asked to participate in society, but increasingly those are being framed specifically as experiences. So, elected officials are not always understanding their communities and perhaps gathering people together into these civic assemblies like the Greek astoa, of centuries past can help bridge the gap. And I think it's these XR technologies and immersive experiences become more ubiquitous and more tied in to artificial intelligence that is making these things really drive. So just wanted to put a couple of those sprinkles out here. Um, but it seems as if what we've got here is on this cusp of the unit of instructional design, the unit of design for is changing from courses and websites and books, focusing on the development of content and information systems to event-based experiences, journeys, simulations that people go through, and developing these communities of practice where people participate in expert situations, and then just creating a variety of different roles and ways that people can access those communities,
Mm,
as well as showcasing these potential and possible, even preferable futures that we might be able to collaborate together. So that's a
I
big,
like that description. Yeah.
big paradigm shift there that we're potentially looking at. So
Mm.
really, really, really excited to welcome Rob Theriault to our Illuminators Forum today. The next slide, I think, is yours, Rob. I'm going to turn it over to you, and yeah, if you want to kind of dive right in. Thanks
Do
for
I
coming.
have, yeah, do I have control of these slides or
Uh, I
I
don't
don't
know.
think I do.
It
I
only
can just tell you when to turn the page.
or just raise your finger. I'll be looking. Yep,
Okay.
one of the
Raise
two.
the finger. Which finger? Sorry.
Sorry, your choice.
Yeah. So first, thanks very much for hosting this event and for inviting me onto your show to
Yeah.
talk about what I've been doing for the past few years and a little bit about my book that was just published the 1st of May, which uh, also coincided with my first day of retirement. So great to be here to talk about that, and maybe we'll just transition to the next slide there. So, just as a backstory, as I mentioned, I was started as a paramedic and fell into teaching fell into paramedicine somewhat unexpectedly. I was traveling with a band and we were involved in a motor vehicle collision, and the ambulance attendants who responded to the call in the middle of the night in February left a lasting impression with me. It really wasn't until a day or so later that I started to think about my interactions with them and that this might be a profession that I'd like to pursue. So I did that and uh, worked in Toronto briefly and then moved to British Columbia to Whistler. And that's kind of where I got my teaching career started. Serendipitously, maybe you call it, but I was the unit chief asked me if I would be their training officer, and I looked at him like, you must be absolutely mad. I just graduated college and I've only worked for 7 months in Toronto, and but his response was that I had more training and experience than anyone there, small service there,
Mhm.
and he said that the Blackcomb ski patrollers came to training nights every Tuesday, and I would get free ski passes. So I thought, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
That sounds good to me. So so I did. I was a training officer there, and after about 2.5 years of working there in Vancouver and North Vancouver, I was working part-time and I was working full-time as a cardiac technologist simultaneously, but I really wanted to work full-time as a medic. So I moved back to Toronto and took a job with the Air Ambulance and trained there as a critical care flight paramedic. Did that for 10 years. And at the at about the 10-year mark, just over 10 years, an opportunity came up to teach full time at a place called the Michener Institute in Toronto. And they were training advanced care paramedics in 21 communities as part of something called Ontario Pre-Hospital Advanced Life Support Study. So it was a simultaneous training of advanced care paramedics and also looking at the comparison between and outcomes of cardiac arrest victims treated with advanced life support versus basic life support. And I ended up with my colleagues training over 500 paramedics for the province during that time,
Wow.
and worked part time as a medic. So I did the switch from full time medic to um, full time educator and part time medic, and worked as
Wow.
a medic part time up until 2019, so 35 years.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, long career. It paid for my daughter's dancing competitions and
That's
a
great.
few other things. But so, yeah,
Yeah.
I've worked 6, 7 days a week for the last, 30 some odd years. And we can move to the next slide there. So when I transitioned to being an educator, this is the photo on the left is me at the Michener Institute in the lab, and the photo on the right is a group of students in Windsor in the hospital setting. But part of the reasons why I was attracted to virtual mixed and augmented reality is because in paramedic programs like nursing and medicine and policing and firefighting, we do a lot of simulation and a lot of
Yeah.
hands-on learning. So there
Right.
are limited lectures, a lot of hands-on in the lab and in the clinical setting, and virtual reality in particular really appealed to me because it was simulation, it was experiential, it's hands-on, and so it's visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And we'll go
Yeah.
to the next one there. And in I did my master's later in life in my early 50s at the University of British Columbia, master's in educational technology, and really um, developed my interest in XR at that point. And in 2017, I attended a paramedic educator conference, excuse me, in Washington, D.C., where an exhibitor was showing virtual reality. And when I tried it, I experienced that same wow effect that most educators experience when they try for the first time. Excuse me. And um, it really got me. You can click on your button a few times there because there's some text that's going to pop up on this particular slide. You might as well go through it here. But I stood in this room and I felt like I was there in the room. There was a sense of spatial presence that was
Yes.
really powerful.
Mhm.
And I could step out of I was in this particular scenario, it's not quite the scenario that you're seeing on the image there, but in this scenario, I was standing in front of someone who was short of breath. It was in his house, and I could step out of his bedroom and into the hallway and walk down the hallway if I wanted to, which to me, for the first time, was really bizarre
Yeah.
experience. And I could pick up his medication on the night table, or I could have the software didn't allow for that at that time. But I also could speak with him, and he would respond to me. And I immediately had this feeling of social connection with him, social presence with him. He looked distressed. I felt a little twinge of adrenaline and empathy when I spoke with him. And I was in this environment that was not dissimilar from a call that I might go to as a paramedic. And so there was that sense of presence and context. And I was able to do things, put him on a heart monitor, a pulse oximeter, give him oxygen, initiate treatments, take a stethoscope, listen to his chest. And all of that was really, um, really shocking to me. And
Yeah.
an interesting thing happened after that experience, after I took the headset off. My brain was trying to process everything that I just seen and experienced, and so I went silent for a little while, and I left the booth. I was sort of in my own head thinking about this and how this could impact student learning in my own paramedic program. And then I ran into another paramedic who's a prolific researcher, and I asked him if he'd tried it and what he thought. And his response really surprised me. Well, yeah, once you get over the wow effect, I'm not sure how valuable this is, if it actually enhances learning. And his response really shocked me because I thought, part of the value of this is the wow effect. But
Sure.
not that we should be attracted to the shiny things, but the wow comes from the fact that it's visual and auditory and kinesthetic, tactile, and that kind of embodied learning is not easy to come by except in real experiences. And so to be able to have experiences like that in a portion of learning that is traditionally theoretical, traditionally, lecture based, where normally I would, describe a case to my paramedic students in PowerPoint bullets, describing how he looks, how he sounds, how he responds, is pretty anesthetizing compared to putting students in an environment with a sick patient, having them look at that sick patient, talk to them, listen to their chest, do things with their hands. There's really just no comparison. And in fact, I speak with educators around the world, and in my estimation, nursing is probably the biggest adopter of experiential immersive learning, because one, they understand the value of simulation, and two, they see that this is something the students can take in a headset home with them and practice at a frequency that would be otherwise impossible in the
Yeah.
lab setting.
Right.
And the early research in this area is showing that students are more confident, they're more knowledgeable, their performance is better in the lab setting. So it's really making a difference. And that's when I decided to introduce VR to our paramedic students in the form of a mass casualty incident training, which seemed to make the most sense to me because we used to do, well, they still do mock disasters in the paramedic program, and it takes 2, 3, sometimes 4 months to organize it because you've got to plan out what kind of mock disaster you want to have. Is it a plane crash, a train crash, a mass shooting, something of that nature? And then
Yep.
we find an area of the campus in the spring that's suitable, when it's going to be dry enough and warm enough to do it, get permission from the college to do it. And then we'd have to contact the police, fire, and paramedic dispatch to let them know this is going on, because people will drive by, see bodies on the property of the college, and call 911 and say,
Right.
looks like multiple people injured here. You better start. So dispatchers know, and we'd have to find volunteers to be casualties and put makeup on them to look
Yeah.
like they have
I
serious
remember those.
injuries. And
That's
yeah, and
amazing.
then the students would go around and do this triage. But in VR, you can do this whenever, however, as frequently as you want without any effort whatsoever. And the students can, in fact, do it on their own, because triage is typically a fairly solo experience. It's, you approach someone,
Yeah.
you do a less than 30-second assessment and determine, are they walking wounded? Are they dead? Are they seriously injured? Need to be transported immediately. And so it was a strong use case. And this was before Jeremy Bailenson book, Experience on Demand, where he
Yep.
described the DICE acronym, things you do in VR that would otherwise in the analog world be dangerous, impossible, counterproductive, or expensive. So when I read that in his book, it really resonated with me. Um, and I love Jeremy Bailenson. He's such an approachable, nice guy, a brilliant
Yeah.
man,
Great.
so easy to talk to. And his book is a must read. If I have to promote it over my own book, definitely want to get his book. It was published in 2018, I think. But
That's about right.
Yeah, and anyway, so that was the start of it, and I ended up doing a demo for surrounding hospitals of VR anatomy and mass casualty incident triage and a couple of other things. And we had about 5 staff from 5 surrounding hospitals attend, and our vice president academic was there. And that
Hmm.
led to a conversation with our VP academic and our president about where I thought virtual mixed and augmented reality was going in education. And I had a nice 45-minute hour talk, not dissimilar to the talk you and I are having right now, about where I thought it was going. And I left that meeting thinking, I'm just going to go back to my little paramedic lab and do my thing. And I felt, pleased with the way the discussion went. But a week later, to my surprise, they reached out to me and said, we'd like to create a new position where someone would help faculty to explore virtual mixed and augmented reality across multiple disciplines. And could you write up a description for that position and apply for it? So I did, and I got it, and I did that for about 6 years. So I
Hmm.
transitioned from right at about, it worked out well because right about the time that I retired from as a paramedic from the road, um, I transitioned into this position. And when I don't know why, but all the time that I was teaching paramedics, I really felt like I wanted to be in the field. Like I personally needed to be in the field. And so now that I was no longer in the field, like literally 3, 4 months later, I took on this position, and it just worked out well for me. I think I was 60 years old when I transitioned to that position. I'm a guy who's never been afraid of change, and um, I wanted to take a different approach from most universities who typically approach XR from the perspective of a single professor who has an idea, meets with the XR development students, they create something, they alpha test it, beta test it, and then they do some research on it, and it may or may not get integrated into curriculum. We didn't have XR development students at that time, but I wasn't interested in that approach. I told our senior leadership I wanted to buy off the shelf products and get XR into the hands of as many teachers and students as possible to begin to understand its
Yep.
pedagogical strengths and shortcomings. And so they were okay with that. And I worked independently. I had a boss, but I didn't feel, I just told my boss what I was doing. I didn't go for permission, which worked out really well for me because, I've been used to being a paramedic who works independently in the field and an educator who works independently. And as you and the audience know, educators in higher ed uh, don't take advice or commands from senior leadership on what technologies to use. So I understood transitioning from the paramedic world to the paramedic educator world to the XR world that innovation happens at the teacher level, and
Right.
it has to grow from the roots up,
Yep.
not from the top down. And so yeah, we started using off the shelf products, and you can go to the next one there. Um, we the when I started in the role, go to the next slide there. I quickly discovered that our uh, architecture. Oh, I think the one before that. Oh no, that's the one. That's the one. Yeah, never mind.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll just quickly go over some of the highlighted XR programs that we did over the coming 6 years. So, we did architectural technology, indigenous language studies, English for academic purposes, tourism, fine arts, business, events management, interior design, interior decorating, occupational therapy, physiotherapy, pre-health, health, nursing, museums and galleries, maritime bridge navigation, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just a quick synopsis. And if we
Yeah.
transition to the next slide, um, what I discovered when I first started in this role was architectural technology was already doing 3D design.
Yeah.
And they started in 2018. And Costin Bianju, who's the coordinator for that program, I write about him in my book, and I write about all the other educators
Uh-huh.
who were innovators at our school. And his students were graduating, so they would design in 2D, and then they would look at their design in 3D, and that spatial to scale visualization was very powerful. And
Yeah.
they were going to work for architectural firms and construction companies, and introducing some of those companies to 3D design for the first time. But what's interesting about that profession is fast forward to 2024, 25, 26, and now the expectation of those companies is that students come out with 3D design because before they construct something, they'll create a digital twin, and that digital twin will become a monitored digital twin in the real world, where there'll be the real building and sensors, Internet of Things sensors throughout the building, and they can monitor the building in virtual reality 3D, on a minute by minute basis, and detect things like small cracks in the concrete, or a water leak, or a
Yeah.
wheelchair door that's not functional. So it went from kind of a novelty to a future proofing the students. And the story I always like to tell is this event I attended in AltSpace VR back in 2020, I think it was. It really shocked me and inspired me. It was an architectural firm that had been contracted to build a children's hospital, and so they
Mhm.
built it in 3D. And one of the architects, shrunk his avatar down to the height of a 5-year-old so he could see the design from a child's perspective. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean that's such a great example of how powerful um, the 3D environment is. And we'll transition to the next slide here. The first project that I embarked on when I started my role as immersive technology manager was to approach the Indigenous language studies to see if they might be interested in going into virtual reality. And you might remember Michael McDonald from Engage and AltSpace VR. He's a language teacher, and I attended one of his events in AltSpace VR. It was French language learning in a French cafe, and of course we were in a French cafe. And I'm not a language teacher, but it struck me immediately that context seems pretty relevant to things like language and
Yeah.
history,
Right.
and almost every other conceivable subject. But um, it really made an impact on me. So I approached two ladies, Michelle O'Brien, who she's a coordinator of Indigenous language studies,
Yeah.
and Angie King, who's a primary teacher, and said, "What do you think about having you and your students go into virtual reality for the language in the home course?" That was their first semester course, and they were a little skeptical, but they
Yeah.
tried it and they loved it, which was good because 4 weeks later the pandemic hit, and we had to send students home. So we sent them home with headsets, and they met in VR for 30 minutes every Thursday, and they'd have conversations in the house and outside the house. This is a medicine wheel in the backyard.
Yep.
Excuse me.
It's beautiful.
So they talk about the medicine wheel, and they have an elder, as do most indigenous language programs around the world. They have an elder who would come to visit, and after classes, she would do prayer and storytelling in the language of Anishinaabe.
Yep.
And it's the pandemic, right? So she's at home alone, and they approached her and said, would you be interested in meeting students in this environment? And they were going to show her how to get in on a computer, on a laptop computer. She was 80 years old, I think at the time, maybe 81, and she'd never used a computer before. But she embraced it pretty enthusiastically, and went in and met with students, and asked to go in with a VR headset. So she started coming in a VR, and where she used to come to the school once every 3 weeks to once a month, she started coming into class every week, and she loved it, and the students loved it.
Yeah.
And she's an avatar for him in there. And we built a second world, called Language in the Community, so a small town. And the school we built, this was Bitspace Development who built it for us. We named the school after her, Nokomis Baldwin, Nokomis's grandmother,
Hmm.
because she was such an inspiration. So
Wow.
anyway, Michelle and Angie have had massive success with language in virtual reality, and you can transition to the next slide here. It's just a video clip, and you can just launch that video clip, or it may launch automatically.
Yep.
These are just some of the different worlds. But excuse me. Um, they Michelle and Angie went on to win provincial national and global awards for their innovation. And although we haven't done any research around language learning and virtual reality, Angie will tell you that she's never seen the students learn the language so quickly as they do when they're in VR, because they're seeing things and they're in this contextual environment and they're doing things and they're in the kitchen picking up pots and pans and describing what they like to eat for breakfast and how they cook it. And so that embodied cognition is very powerful, and you get that either with real experience or with virtual reality. And in this case, you get to go on field trips to places you would be impractical or too expensive to do in the
Yeah.
real world. This is the house, and we're going through the house. The doors are a little narrow, so it's built for skinny people. And
Right.
we're going into the kitchen here, and you can pick up pots and pans. I always joke there's a piece of steak on the counter, and I tell people don't eat the steak. It's been sitting on the counter for 4 years now. And this is the little town language in the home. And to your right, you see a school bus, and you can't see it, but the school is named after Nokomis Baldwin. It bears her name on there, and she's such a sweet lady. I think she's 84, 85 now,
Oh,
and just
wow.
a beautiful
Yeah.
person. Yeah, so
That's
you can move on to the next slide there, and I'll just talk more broadly, less about specific program areas, but about some of the things that are happening in virtual reality that are really exciting. And I'm not really saying anything that the audience doesn't already know, but in medicine, it's really fascinating because now we have Gen AI avatars as patients,
right.
and so you can have relatively normal conversations with patients and elicit a history. What's their medical history, medications, allergies, that kind of thing. And you can program the avatars to have specific medical history, meds and allergies, and specific symptoms that they can describe for you. But some of the things they say are unpredictable, which is super cool and is exactly what you want. There's a
Yeah.
company out of Toronto called Lumeto, for example. They had a physician doing a simulation in VR, and he accidentally dropped a virtual medical instrument on the floor, and he said, "Oops." And the Gen AI avatar said something no one expected. The Gen AI avatar said, "Oops. I don't like it when my doctor says, oops, that's not very reassuring." And so everyone
That's
had a great
I
laugh
might
over
say
that.
that. Right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and the interesting thing about Gen AI, and this is something all of us as educators and educational institutions have to really think about, is we want AI avatars to one be able to help us role play, whether it's in counseling or de-escalation or medical simulation or any other form of education. But we also want them to be as real as possible. We don't want them to be overly agreeable. We want them to push back. We want them to be a little unpredictable.
Mhm.
And if there's an AI mentor involved in that whole scenario, we want them to engage in the student in Socratic dialogue, to not
Yes.
always answer all questions, but to ask questions as well, to enhance critical thinking, not stifle critical thinking. So these are all, you mentioned in instructional design earlier in the opening slides, and that's such a critical piece where educators have a huge role to play in conversations with enterprise around the proper, appropriate instructional design, whether it's AI mentors or whether it's virtual reality experiences. But I'm going to come back to AI in a minute. Just transition to the next slide there and talk about visualization and scalability. We can go to the next slide. I became a little infatuated with scalability in 2020 in alt space VR again. I so miss alt space VR, where someone had created a, a coronavirus, the virus that causes COVID-19, and scaled it up to the size of a small planet. And so this is me walking on the coronavirus, looking at spike proteins, and you can grab the proteins and look at them in some detail.
Yeah.
And I thought, like, this was, I was so excited about this level of visualization. I almost wet my pants. It was pretty amazing. And so we transition to the next slide and the slide after that, some more visualization experiences. This is a chicken It's on my street, by the way. I thought it'd be appropriate to have a chicken on the road. And chickens are small, and but you can scale them. And in augmented reality, you can have a teacher and several students looking at this chicken and having a conversation around its anatomy. But interestingly, you can scale that chicken to 20 feet, 40 feet, and lower its legs below the ground. And student and teachers can walk inside the chicken and look at the anatomy internal. Yeah, I didn't want to say chicken crossing the road, but that was the what I was getting at, right?
That's,
Um,
yeah.
and transition to the next slide. And I love to scale these humans to several hundred feet. And I don't know if you can see it, but just for scale, there's a couple of little old ladies on my street standing behind
Yeah. I love
the
it.
anatomical model. They're not wearing VR headsets, so they can't see him. But if they could, they'd recognize that he's got a really nice butt. And I had him facing me, so they couldn't see the front part of his body. But but so cool when you can scale this guy to enormous sizes and lower him down or have him lay supine or prone or whatever, and look at the anatomy in detail. I attended a Stanford medical school event in Engage VR where I was pretty excited about what they did. They took a human arm and they enlarged it to about 20 feet long and laid it close to the ground. So you could look at the muscles, the tendons, the insertion points in detail. And it just, you know, so visually impactful.
Yeah.
The next slide there, that's in my emerging technology lab. So this is a car crash. In the picture, it's difficult to appreciate in the picture, but the next slide will show you better visualization of the cars. But you can take this car crash, this is photogrammetry, and look at it in detail. And it would be inappropriate to take police, fire, or paramedic students to a motor vehicle collision to look at a car. I'm not sure that video is going to launch or not.
Yeah.
But
It
if it,
says I have to request access.
yeah, oh, okay, no worries. So we go back to the previous slide there,
This one?
and yeah, so there's this van that's T-boned, and of course, you would worry about the driver in that T-boned vehicle. What kinds of injuries has he or she sustained? What's the potential for internal injuries? And we know based on epidemiological studies and massive amounts of data that cars are designed to attenuate energy when you hit them. The fronts crumple and intentionally, and the sides
Right.
crumple and absorb energy. And if the internal compartment is intact, in other words, if there's no intrusion into the compartment, we don't worry too much about internal injuries. Might have an arm fracture or leg
Really?
fracture, but we're not
Huh.
worried about too much about internal injuries. On the other hand, if there's intrusion of 3 to 6 inches, we worry about internal injuries. And why is that important? Well, you might think, well, based on your assessment, you would determine just how serious the injuries are. But after a car crash, people often don't experience any pain at all initially because they're so overwhelmed with the emotion of the event. And secondly, they may not have signs of internal injury because their vital signs are within normal range at that point. But based on the intrusion that a paramedic observes, might make the difference between deciding to go to the local hospital versus a trauma center. And the trauma center is what that person needs. And being able to visualize that in augmented reality, slowing down the crash, is an experience that paramedic students and fire students and police students would never ever get because they don't go to car crashes until they're on the road, until they're actually working. And then they're so focused on extricating the occupants and treating the injuries, et cetera. They don't have the time to really, or may not have the time or the mindset to look at the telltale signs. But in augmented reality, we can teach them to do that so that when they get out in the real world, they're doing it at a glance. They've already done it many, many times. And at a glance, they can determine, okay, this guy is going to the trauma center, not the local hospital. So
Yeah.
that visualization is so important in so many different areas.
Really.
Um, it's incredible. So we'll just go to the next slide here. And
But
we'll go
through,
through these things pretty quickly. So, as we all know, uh, you know, we can go to, yeah, there we go. So we all know, like, generative AI became available to the world in November 2022, and of course, um, the academic world just went nuts in January 2023 when the next semester started, when we all discovered that students could use Gen AI to write essays and take home assignments, and schools immediately went into policing mode, what I like to call the Dolores Umbridge phase, and started generating policies around ethical use of AI,
Right.
things haven't improved dramatically. I mean, we're still going through efficacy phases or efficiency phases where teachers and students are learning how to use it efficiently and hopefully in ways that improve writing and improve critical thinking and don't stifle writing and don't, cause brain atrophy. Um, and um, and at the same time in XR, if we transition to the next slide, we saw AI being introduced into XR, things like EarthQuest and Brink Travel, where you could talk with an AI, and we go to the next slide there, and of course medical simulation. And what I envision is, in addition to the things I mentioned earlier about nursing simulation, I envision an AI mentor at the end of a call, a scenario, or a resuscitation, having a talk with the student that's Socratic in nature, a debriefing. So the AI
Yeah.
would say to the student, "So you just managed this patient in heart failure. How do you think you did?" And just as a nursing teacher would do that with a student, and the student will say, "Well, I think I did okay. What do you think you missed?" Well, I think I forgot to ask this particular question. Okay, good. And and then it would engage in this dialogue around, um, tell me about heart failure. What's the most common cause of congestive heart failure? Well, it's chronic systemic hypertension. And um, how does that impact the heart? Well, when the blood pressure is high, the heart has to work harder, and eventually over time it begins to fail. And so they have this really engaging Socratic dialogue to not only so the student is understanding what happened in the call that they just did, but they're beginning to take a deeper dive into the pathophysiology and
Yep.
understanding of what medications are used and why they're used, and what may work and may not work, and what may worsen their condition, what may improve the condition, and how to look at drugs and interventions from a risk to benefit ratio perspective. So this kind of Socratic dialogue with an AI mentor, I think we're going to see in simulations across multiple disciplines, whether it's
Yes.
history or whether it's anatomy or whether it's simulation or whether it's engine repair. And I think that's going to be incredible. If we transition to the next slide there, we also know that the role play opportunity, you can just click on that a couple of times because there's two more images there. Um, Role play is becoming really important. The one on the top right is public speaking, that I'm sure the audience is all familiar with, where the audience is Gen AI avatars, and they're engaged or they're not engaged depending on the quality of your speech. And uh,
Yeah.
and at the end of it all, they're asking these deep questions and provocative questions, because they've been listening to you the entire time. And analytics is giving you feedback on how you did. Did you speak too fast? Did you talk too slow? Did
Yep.
you say too many times? Were you looking back at your slides too frequently? So you can improve the next time around. And the one on the bottom left is police de-escalation. The one on the bottom right is fun. Two ladies from our hairstyling program approached me, and I was really excited and pleased that they approached me. So I thought, hairstyling, wow, this is great. Like, I haven't talked to anyone in our hairstyling program. And they wanted role play for their students to have conversations with clients.
Yeah.
So we created these Gen AI avatar clients, 6 of them, between myself and some other Center for Teaching and Learning staff. And they all have different personalities and different needs and wants. So, one is looking for a business type haircut, and she doesn't want to cut too short, and she doesn't want it too sassy. She wants a little bit of color, but nothing extreme. And so the students have to ask all these questions to get to, what she wants. And the fun part is, if the student recaps what the avatar wants and makes a mistake, the avatar will say, no, 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 I don't want 3 inches cut. I want just 2 inches cut. And so it's like a real conversation. And one of the avatars is someone who had a really bad haircut the last time and is quite angry and very
Yeah,
reluctant to, even be in the salon. And
right.
our XR support guy, Victor, developed this salon. It's quite beautiful. It's looking at the back right now, but at the front is a window with a street and a park across the street. It's really quite a beautiful little salon there. And we can transition to the next slide here. And so, one of the things that the, after Gen AI was first introduced, then we started to see smart devices like the Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses.
Right.
And Gen AI was somewhat disruptive of the essay and the take-home assignment, but smart devices, not just glasses, but pens with videos and AI,
Hmm.
pins with video and AI, pendants, um, smart contact lenses, which are in prototype right now, and other devices, even earbuds,
Right.
are going to disrupt the exam. And quite frankly, I think they're going to make exams obsolete because I can look at an exam with my smart glasses right now, the ones I'm wearing, and it'll give me the answers. And so if we uh, transition to the next slide here, I I did some work with our AI students to build an intelligent tutoring system, essentially an AI mentor. And um, I think we're going to have no choice but to do two things. One, deal with the fact that exams that are going to become obsolete. Continue to work in the efficiency phase with Gen AI for writing and critical thinking, et cetera.
Yeah.
But also think about introducing AI mentors to every student at college and university, and maybe in the K to 12 levels as well, some of those upper levels, that is with the student the entire time at the intersection of XR, maybe just simple smart glasses, or my preference would be augmented reality glasses, where the AI is engaging the student in conversations and helping them learn at the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy. So knowledge comprehension and application in particular, and tracking their learning at all times. So, with the current system of like the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, I can point to an organ and say, hey, what's this organ? And it'll say, that's the liver. And we'll have a conversation about the liver, its major functions, diseases associated with it, how patients might present clinically with those diseases, how kinds of
Right.
treatments might be available for that. And but I think my personal thinking is that we'll sort of level off if you click on the next image. Excuse me, we'll level off at augmented reality, where the glasses can still be used with computer vision to identify things, but it'll also generate images. So
Right.
in this case, the student comes out of a class after they've talked about something called the oxyhemoglobin association curve. The student doesn't quite understand it. The AI will ask some questions to see where the knowledge gap is. And then we'll say, hey, do you want me to generate this animated graph for you? And so
Yeah.
it'll do that within the student's field of view. And the student might say, this is great. How would someone with end stage liver failure present clinically? Give another click there. It'll say, put your VR glasses on and I'll take you into a hospital setting, and it'll create an intensive care unit environment in real time. And the student will see a patient on life support and have a conversation with AI around why are they pale, why is their heart rate high and their blood pressure low. And so I envision, and I talk about this in my book, particularly in the last two chapters. We can transition to the last slide here, or second last slide. Um, AI mentors being issued. The AI mentor knows the students' courses, their learning objectives, they're tracking learning at all times. We transition to a competency-based system because some students will learn at a faster pace than others. Most students some students will finish in 10 weeks instead of 14 weeks. Most students will do the whole traditional semester because they're social creatures and they like to be there.
Yeah.
Um, and the teacher focuses more on things like case-based learning and project-based learning and critical thinking and interpersonal skills and interprofessional skills and the nuances of the profession. And so and I apologize. I've been doing most of the talking here, John, and haven't
No, it's good.
left you
This is
haven't
great.
left you a split second to get some questions in. But part of the reason I wrote this book, and it might sound like I'm selfless about writing the book. It's not entirely selfless, but one of the things I've loved to do, always loved to do, as both as a paramedic and then a critical care flight paramedic and then an educator, is to keep notes on the things that I learn as I'm learning them, and over time those notes have translated into books that I've written over the years,
Yeah,
and Future of Education is Experiential is my fourth book. Um, I'm writing another one now, but again for paramedic students. But I've always liked to collect information and usually make it available for free to other educators because I've learned so much from other educators, and I like to share what I've learned. And when it comes to educational technology, Paulo Coelho wrote, and I love this quote. He wrote, "Sometimes you have to travel a long way to find what is near," and that's so true of educational technology. So
yeah,
when I collect 23 pages of educational VR applications, or have develop a 30 some odd page lit search collection, I share those freely and willingly
yeah,
with anyone on LinkedIn typically. And the book is a little bit different because I guess it's a lot of work. So and I also had it you pay money for an editor and peer reviewers and things the likes, and so I got to recoup some of my costs. But really, the book was all about sharing what I've learned through XR because we've scaled it on such a massive level, and trying to make the journey shorter for other educators and educational technologists. Yeah, so I've got another slide, but I think we can stop there. I don't think there's a need to go on any further.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Rob, I mean, so awesome. The you were saying there at the end with that your quote about you have to travel a long ways to get near. I was thinking about as I was preparing for our talk today about, so many of the educational theorists over the centuries have talked about how
Mm,
experience is the ultimate education, from John
yeah.
Dewey and you know, just Kolb and Piaget and all of them have really kind of put that there. And yet now here we are. And there's a
Mm,
potential now as it's starting to scale and we have these potentialities to be able to really reach and teach each person given their needs and contexts. It's very heady. And I really do think that this is a great possibility space for us right now. Um, what
yeah. No argument for me. We just have to get through the barriers, and most of the barriers are
Yeah,
technological, right?
right?
It's with the headsets. It's a form factor. Um, Universities like Simon Fraser University are doing work on with the use of devices, ultrasound devices that disrupt the vestibular system to mitigate motion sickness. So um, with AI, we have to eliminate the sycophancy. We have to make the AI mentors more Socratic, so they're
Right.
helping students become critical thinkers, not stifling it. These are all technological problems. I always, I the first time I heard the term hallucination in the context of AI, I laughed because when an AI says something that's incorrect, we call it hallucination. When a teacher
Yeah.
says something incorrect, what do we call it? I don't know. And I don't know about you, but
Negligence.
I mean,
Yeah.
I've been teaching for a long time, and on occasion, to my horror, I discovered I've been teaching that wrong.
Yeah,
Um,
done that too. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean sometimes it's not uncommon for things to be wrong in textbooks.
Yeah.
Even though they're
Oh, yeah.
scrutinized by the publishers and peer reviewed and everything else, there are mistakes in there, and
Oh, for sure. The number
uh,
of errors in textbooks generally far outweighs the number of errors that you find in Wikipedia. And people are always, teachers are like, no, you can't use Wikipedia because it hasn't been created. Well,
And
they've
yet it's
done
fed it in real
analyses
time.
of other comparator Encyclopedia Britannica, and they're full of errors too, you know.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes it's just because new knowledge has become available and
Yeah,
teachers are unaware. I mean, that's happened to me. Um, but and you'd think, anatomy, physiology is a pretty static knowledge base, but it changes too. We discover new
right.
things, new
So
functions of
many,
organs we didn't know existed 10 years ago.
right?
Um, so yeah, what do you call it when teachers make those mistakes, or just y- the teacher has misinformation. We don't call it hallucination. We just call it a mistake. So,
Yeah.
but you can correct those things. You can correct bias and errors in AI. Much more difficult to do in humans.
Yep. So my I guess my question for you, we're coming close to the hour, but then I'd like to give a chance for any members of our audience to ask a question if they put something in chat or had something there. But was wondering like what you thought were the greatest barriers for scaling this to a societal level. And you mentioned the technological issues of addressing the barriers in the infrastructure and getting things talking together. But yeah, what do you think are the barriers for making this sing bigger?
So many, um,
Yeah,
and 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 the solution to barriers are partly technological, but the solutions to barriers are mostly human and human champions who can see beyond the barriers and see the potential for correction of those barriers, diminishment of those barriers, etc. But there's cost and subscription costs and people and skeptics and Luddites and um, actually, I don't like the term Luddites because rarely do I ever meet Luddites. I meet people who are skeptical and they're set in their ways of learning. But I've
yeah,
met people, teachers who are skeptical, but who have the right attitude, the attitude of, well, it's not about me, it's about my students. So let's give it a shot and see how this works.
right,
Um, but I think the thing we have to keep in mind is so many of those barriers can be addressed in one way or another. And so, we're educa- educational technology in general has such a high level of fragility, and rarely does it reach a threshold level of adoption. We saw the transparency machine reach adoption quickly. The chalkboard, the smart boards came and sort of went quickly. Synchronized online learning, I thought it had no future. In 2005, 2005, I started teaching synchronously online, a mix of asynchronous and synchronous. And by 2019, there were fewer than 10 faculty at my college who were using synchronous online learning platforms. A
yeah,
year later, the pandemic hits, and every school in every city around the world is now teaching synchronously online. So it took a pandemic for that one to reach a threshold level of adoption. But
yep,
XR, unlike any other educational technology before it, and I challenge anyone to correct me if I'm wrong on this, is the only medium in which students can learn in the cognitive, psychomotor, and affective domains, all in
yeah,
one medium, which is so powerful, and is being underutilized at a communication standpoint, um, and so there's
mm,
so much potential, and I think we have to continue to vigorously push it and research it and understand it and work with enterprise to improve it, so that it
absolutely.
reaches that threshold level of adoption. And I suspect it will. I'm fairly optimistic it will, but schools are funny, right? There are very few people, like, I'm quite confident that the 16 people who are in the audience right now are early adopters, forward thinkers, innovators. They're not the people I'm worried about. The people I'm worried about are the leaders who some oftentimes have difficulty seeing beyond what's immediately in front of them, and they might get enthusiastic about a technology, but then that enthusiasm wanes, and if there's a financial crisis at the college or university, one of the first things to get cut is innovation. And so I'm anxious about the technology, excited about it, and anxious about
Yep, yep. I think that pretty much captures what my feelings about it as well. Um, we had I had a couple of things at the end here. I see the connection between
Oh
XR
yeah.
and AI. That's next year's conference for us, as well as what a lot of people in our space are talking about is this merger, marriage, interconnection, amplifying XR with AI and what that's going to do.
Mm.
So I really like that Rob. I wanted to make a note that we're just a couple of days from our 12th annual Immersive Learning Research Network conference, and we have kind of four different layers or spheres of engagement. For the first time ever, we're opening up a public layer that's open to the public. It'll be opening here in a couple of days, our virtual campus on Frame VR with examples of high quality immersive learning that's done by research as well as practitioners. That'll be open 24/7, 365. And we're anxious or eager to start engaging the public in uh, showing them why this matters and what makes the most sense and hoping we can speed up adoption that way. At the same time, on Sunday and Monday of this coming week, in a few days, we've got our professional layer, is our online conference, which will be taking place in the event management platform of Cvent, um, managed by YouTube in professional sessions, managed like a traditional scholarly, and then those will end up on our YouTube channel. In between the online conference and the face-to-face conference, we'll have guided virtual adventures led by Amani Alkiat, our colleague and leader in that regard. And then on the 27th through the 30th of June, we'll be in Athens, Greece, where we'll be streaming out to our online audience. Um, while we meet there, where Western science was born, and we're looking to create sort of this discipline of immersive science that will land hopefully with the public in an increasingly big way. So that's just a plug for our conference. There are still some tickets left, and Rob, if you're able to come, I'm happy to shoot you a ticket. Just let me know. I really appreciate you coming on today and talking
Ag-
with us. And
Agrees.
yeah, we'll have another Illuminators Forum coming up in July, and continuing on through the rest of the year. Our immersive learning research, our immersive learning futures workshop is going to be open on July 1st for the public to um, examine and contribute to and respond to as well. So keep a lookout for that. Um, so yeah, just wanted to thank you so much for all the work you've done and the great friendship. We've had lots of good conversations, and you've
Mhm.
led the Champions for Higher Education in XR project for iLearn and been a good friend. So I just wanted to thank you from that personally as well.
We appreciate that. Thank you. And thanks
Yeah,
for having me on.
absolutely, my friend. Let's see. I thank you, Karen. Thank you, everybody in attendance for being here. And if you're watching us on YouTube, thanks for joining in. Please subscribe to our iLearn channel and click that like button. We sure appreciate that. And I hope to see you out in the metaverse or in Athens, Greece, at a future iLearn meetup.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thanks again, John.
Take care. Thank you.